The notion that more is better is usually very talked about in terms of performance. Train while there's sleep, train more and you'll build more muscle. And people usually believe that. But that might be their biggest mistake if their goal is to build more muscle. Today we're going to talk about training frequency and why the gym is the last place where growth actually happens.
Once your goal is sharply but realistically defined, all that remains is carrying out your plan. In other words, you'll never know how good you might have become unless you try. So let's get with it.
Training frequency in a way is very similar to the principle of duration that we talked about in the last video. Duration is basically the time that you take doing an exercise or a whole workout. And it's directly connected to the recovery aspect of bodybuilding, which is when we're actually building muscle. A lot of people think that building muscle starts at the gym, but it doesn't. The stimulus is in the gym. You're gonna send a signal so the body understands that it needs to grow. But growth only happens after the workout and not immediately after. And we're gonna understand this a little bit more clear today. Alright, quick recap here. We know that physiologically we're essentially the same. So the stimulus required for us to build muscle should be the same across everyone. We got that part done. Now, what is that stimulus? A high intensity workout. And high intensity is usually tied to how close you get to failure. Alright, next point, all done. If we engage in high intensity exercise, do you think you can do that for a long time, or is it a short period of time? Intensity has a negative relationship with duration. You can either work out intensely or you can have a long workout. There's no long and intense workout. Is that analogy with the marathon and the sprinters? Cool, we got that part done too. And now the next question is, how often should I be engaging in any workout? Because when you think about working out, we usually do the splits, right? We can do a bro split, we can do push-pull leg, we can do upper lower. And when people do these, they're actually thinking about only the muscle. And if I train chest on Monday, for example, I'm not gonna train chest on Tuesday. I'm gonna train chest again, I don't know, on Thursday, something like that. But there's more to it than just the muscular aspect. There's a systemic fatigue, which happens in any workout, doesn't matter which muscle group. So let's make this part a little bit more clear. When you work out, you spend energy. And after you work out, the body doesn't start building muscle. It needs to first go ahead and replenish all those energy reserves that you spent during the workout. And only after you do that, the body starts building more muscle. That's how the process works. A good analogy is, you have your car, and then you have to fill up with gas. So you use your car, and then the gas tank is empty. That's the workout. You empty your gas tank. After that, you gotta fill up your tank, and then only after you fill up your tank, you're able to use your car again. I think that's a pretty clear analogy on how it will work. You're only able to grow muscle after your energy is replenished, because without energy you can't really replenish the muscle, because that in itself requires energy. So the first thing that we have to understand is that working out isn't building muscle. Working out is about sending the signal to the body to understand that it needs to build muscle. It's completely different. Growth happens when you're resting, when you're recovering. That's the only moment when you're actually growing. But what are some things you have to account for when you're talking about rest? Resting isn't only about the muscle that you worked. So if you hit a chest workout today, for example, you're not gonna hit chest tomorrow. All right, that's pretty clear. But what we're not accounting for is the systemic fatigue, which is basically your central nervous system. And why is that important? That is where all the information is interpreted and processed in your body. With a high intensity workout, all the effort that you're putting in, it uses a lot of your central nervous system, a lot of it. So there's the fatigue systemically in your body, and there's the fatigue that's specific to the muscle that you worked. So assuming that you're actually doing a high intensity workout, for you to assume that you're able to go ahead and hit a whatever workout next day, back, legs, whatever, you're not accounting for the systemic fatigue that the chest workout caused. So you're just building more fatigue systemically, which the body will also need to recover from to engage in muscle growth. So the topic of workout frequency, it's much deeper than which muscles you should hit in X amount of time. It's about the systemic fatigue that's included in all of that. As you guys might know, I'm from Brazil, and the bodybuilding community here is pretty tight. And funny enough, I know people that know very influential people. But you know that game that people play, like, how many people would it take for me to meet this celebrity? Whatever. In the bodybuilding scene, it's really not a lot for me. Because of the gym that I go to, there's a lot of pros there. But anyways, what's the point? If you guys know Derek Lunsford and Ramondino, their training coach, right, just working out, is Fabrício Pacholocchi. And he works directly with the owner of the gym that I go to. So, in terms of content, I learned a lot through them. Not directly, but I hear conversations, I can keep up with the content, so this is something that I try to learn from, right? And one thing that people always ask them is how to bring a body part up. Like, I'm lacking chest, I'm lacking quads, I'm lacking this, I'm lacking that. And each and every time that they talk about this, they say that they decrease the volume. They decrease the amount of times they hit that muscle group, but they increase the intensity. So that just highlights how important the recovery process is, because growth only happens while you're recovering, while you're resting. So if you're able to maximize intensity and maximize recovery, that's when you're going to see the biggest difference in whatever muscle group you want to work on. And that directly challenges everything that we always believed, that, oh my God, I need more biceps. I got to train them more. I got to do more sets. I got to train them more frequently. It's actually the opposite, because growth only happens when you're resting. I've said this, I don't know, 5 times by now, and I'm going to keep saying it. Growth only happens when you're resting. Now, I don't necessarily agree with what Mike says. This is not in the book, but it's in some videos that I've watched. I'm pretty sure that he says the time in between workouts should be of at least 90 something hours. So you would work out once every 4 days. What we see more today is that if you're able to engage a muscle group frequently enough with the ability to recover, that's the optimal goal. So I try to hit every single body part twice a week, but my volume is very low in each workout. So let me think actually. For chest, I'm doing like 6 working sets a week, divided into sessions. So the volume is pretty fucking low, right? But I'm able to hit it more frequently while keeping the recovery on point. This is where you gotta find your balance. The intensity must always be high, that's non-negotiable. The duration is gotta be short because, again, working out intensely requires you to work out briefly, because you can have a long and intense workout. It just doesn't work like that. But then the frequency aspect, you just gotta see if you're recovering. And my approach to this is just checking whether you're getting stronger or not, which is what Mike actually talks about too. And that's the number one reason why I keep a logbook with me. Every single session that I have is gonna be logged. The amount of weight that I used, the number of reps that I got. The next session that I go and I check all those numbers, I'm gonna have a clear goal. I'm gonna see, hey, this is what I did last week. So if I'm recovering, I should be able to get either more reps with the same weight or add more weight to a given exercise and either keep the same amount of reps or even increase. And that, of course, is maintaining the proper form. You don't, progressive overload in that sense isn't whatever it takes. You're keeping the strict form, you're keeping everything the same, the quality is always there. But if you're able to have more reps added or more weight, keeping everything else the same, yes, that's actual progressive overload. So the key point here is, you're never gonna know how much you can handle until you do it. And the point is, you should find your breaking point. You should find the number of sets where you're actually now recovering. So you keep a logbook, and if you're doing 10 sets a week for a given body part, and you're still recovering, you're still getting stronger, awesome, do 12 next week. And then you see if you're recovering. You are, do 14, 15, 16. And I'm just throwing random numbers. But there's gonna be a point where you're not gonna recover. And you're like, all right, this is my breaking point. So this is my limit right now in these conditions. That's the number of sets that you should do. There's no general rule that is gonna fit everyone, because recoverability is essentially different. The mechanism for muscle growth is the same across everyone, but how people recover is different. It is individual. That's also going to vary depending on the type of moment that you're living. So, when I was in a bulk, I think I was doing 7 to 8 sets for chest, and now I'm doing 5 to 6. Why do I say 5 to 6? 2 weeks ago I was doing 6 sets, but then this week that passed, I saw a big decrease in one of the exercises. It wasn't because of anything else. All the variables were controlled. Meal times were the same. I was fully rested, but I'm in a deficit. So, right now my recoverability is hindered even more because I'm in a deficit, just because of that. So accounting for it, what am I gonna do? Just keep doing 6 sets? Of course not. I'm just gonna decrease. So I went from 6 sets 2 weeks ago, and now I'm doing 5. And this is where common sense is gonna kick in. After you understand the mechanism, you just gotta adapt to each situation that you're living. But of course, in a bulk, in a caloric surplus, your recoverability is gonna be better because you're having more energy, more fuel. Versus when you're trying to lose fat, there is the risk of you losing muscle too if you're doing too much. That's why I like the logbook, but that's just me. I posted a short these days where I talked about this. My approach is having a clear goal every session. I know the numbers and I'm very analytical in general. So that works for me. But then one of the guys commented, he was like, dude, that's really not the right approach. Going to the gym should be like brushing your teeth. Once it's that natural, you don't really got to track anything. And that works wonders for me. I'm like, dude, awesome. Like, I don't work like that because I need the number to see whether I'm actually improving. There's no feeling that I'm better. I don't really work like that. I need the facts. I need the numbers. But each person's going to be individual. But again, when we talk about muscle growth, just literally building more muscle, not losing fat, we're not talking about anything else. It's just building muscle. You need to make sure that you're recovering because that's when muscle growth happens. And recovering just means that you're getting stronger every workout. Keeping the strict form, keeping everything else the same, you're getting stronger, so you are recovering. And contrary to what most people think, you can get stronger in a deficit. And that's exactly what I was talking about. I'm going to decrease the volume. So from 6 sets that I was doing, I went to 5. But I can still progress because I adjusted the volume, which essentially is what builds the fatigue. So after I remove that factor, I'm still able to increase even in a deficit. So if you really want to find out how frequently you should work out, you should consider a logbook. Because I don't see any other way where you can assess your fatigue. Of course, there's the feeling aspect. You can feel fatigued. And you'll be like, damn, maybe I shouldn't work out today. But that just gives too much room for a mistake in my opinion. You're going to be based on nothing, just feeling. And I'm rational. Again, I need the numbers, right? When you're thinking about workout frequency, you got to consider not only the muscular aspect, so training frequency based on each muscle, but the systemic fatigue. My current approach is I do upper lower. That's my split. But I don't do upper lower rest, upper lower rest. That's not what I do. I found that the leg workouts really kill me. I can't go ahead and work out next day after a leg day, or even the day before. So I work out and I rest. I work out and I rest. Doesn't matter which workout it is. If it's upper, lower, every day after a workout is a rest day, and every day before a workout is a rest day. That's what works for me now. That's what I assessed based on experience. There's no given number for you to follow. But if you are working out intensely, going to failure with proper form, you should take rest more seriously. Because guess what? That's where muscle growth actually happens. I'm sorry this was so repetitive. I just want to get the message across, and this was a very short chapter. It just builds on everything that we talked about, and then there's a short section which talks about the frequency in itself, which is what I try to do here. But that's it. Fourth principle, frequency. For the next video, we're going to talk about the next principle, which is specificity, which is kind of like a combination of the principle of identity and intensity. We're going to combine both to understand specificity. All right, y'all. See you next time.